Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And today we're talking about Top Gun Maverick. The sequel to a film that's, getting on for 40 years old. Top Gun came out in 1986.
I saw it when it came out.
I still haven't seen it because I was kind of thinking this would have a re-release of Top Gun around it when, the sequel came out. And I think maybe it would have had it come out when it was supposed to, but COVID kind of got in the way, so that never happened and I haven't got around to seeing the original. It's directed by Joseph Kosinski, and this is actually not his first time directing a sequel to a film that's decades old. He did Tron Legacy.
Yes.
And Tron was 30 years old, roughly, at the time. And Tron Legacy was seriously stylish.
It was wonderful. I thought it wasn't a success, but I thought it was a real filmmaker's film. Yeah, it was visually dazzling.
Yeah.
And he did things with images and sounds that really kind of lingered with me.
It also had a great soundtrack by Daft Punk. Amazing sound. But unfortunately, it did have an absolute charisma vacuum at its centre in Garrett Hedlund. This does not.
Yes.
This has obviously Tom Cruise with his winning smile, and it also has Miles Teller playing the son of Goose, who was lost in Top Gun. And this is explained as much as you need in this film for those of you who haven't seen the original, like me. I thought this was pretty stylish too. When we saw the trailers, and we've been seeing a lot of them in recent months, I have thought to myself, this looks kind of small. Like, all the trailers were about these dogfights that they were doing in training at the Top Gun Academy, sort of, best of the best thing. And Tom Cruise is kind of showing off and like pushing these kids to their limit. He's the instructor now. And also the kind of that there were scenes or shots of scenes that were just in kind of like the canteen or some office that they're chatting and talk, whatever. And I thought this looks kind of small. Like, it's, I don't know, that it felt like the frame wasn't full of people or something like that. Do you know what I mean? There felt like a thinness. I think that is true of the film. But
I don't feel that.
But I still loved it. I mean, I had a fantastic time. I still somehow think that's true, though, that it's a film that feels kind of compressed. It's a film that shoots in one direction and doesn't have much room for these side plots and things. It's just really the one with the Jennifer Connelly character that's of any significance. It takes you out of that room.
Well, no, I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
And this is maybe where the sequel comes in, because in fact it's wrapping up all kinds of, it has all other kinds of strands. It has the thing with Goose. It has the thing with Goose's wife and her death and promises. And it has the thing with Iceman and the Val Kilmer character. It is kind of very elegantly calling on the previous film. Yeah, both in terms of those narrative strands that I'm talking about, but also visually, right? So, the shot of Kelly McGillis in the motorcycle, you now see Jennifer Connelly, and it's just an image. The shot of him in his whites, it's just an image, but it harks back, right? It's kind of, it's minimal, but it's enough to kind of jog your memory, and it's enough to kind of involve this particular narrative, into something, the previous one, but in a way that doesn't put off people who haven't seen the film. So I didn't think it was, I thought it was thin intellectually, It is this rah-rah American exceptionalism. It is about, the grit and, individualism and discipline of one person overcoming kind of everything.
Which is fundamentally stupid, because the thing about the Navy, but the Army and Navy and all the military, is you go there and you follow the rules. If you don't follow rules, people get hurt, and your commander you do everything he says and so on. It's like Full Metal Jacket, And here it's like, no, you're the best of the best. You get to think for yourself. You get to break the rules. And when you do, there's no consequences and all of this.
Yeah, well, I must say, I think this is exceptional filmmaking. It looks amazing. I was moved by it and so on, right? So, I don't want to put it down. I think that it's quite extraordinary. We were talking before about, the guarantee of a Tom Cruise film is that it'll be beautifully produced.
Yeah, the man has standards.
Yeah, the best of everything. The cinematography is superb, the supporting cast, you couldn't ask for better. And this has all of that, and it's very well done, right? And it's kind of like a bit of a thrill to see, actually.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I mean, there were moments where I just groaned aloud, right? Like,
Plenty.
yeah, so many.
A lot of them are those lines where it's like a line has been set up earlier in the film, something about believe in yourself, for instance. It's not that, but say it's that. And then later on in the film, the character who had that said to them says it to the person who said it to them. You know, so Tom Cruise says something to Miles Teller, then later on he says it back and it's like, oh, there's that line, it got turned back on you. And it's a bit chummy, and it's that thing that happens. And it happens a lot here. I did think early on I'm going to hate this because it was super obsessed with referring back to its predecessor. To the point where it actually used old footage of it at one point. Used the bit where he's playing the piano, and he's kind of reminded of Goose's Goose because it's Goose's son.
Rooster's father, Goose.
Right? Yeah. So
even the names.
Yeah. So Rooster's the son, played by Miles Teller. And Goose is the dad. And when Rooster's playing the piano, it's the same song that Goose played way back when. And you see the footage of it and think, God, it's not going to do that very much, is it? And it doesn't after that, thankfully.
I mean, let's clear the decks here, because I think we're missing the main point, which to me, this is a massively successful film. It's a massively successful piece of filmmaking, right? And I think that has to be acknowledged. That, you know, it looks fantastic. You know, the characters work. I mean, I was touched by it. You know, the whole kind of father-son thing. Jennifer Connelly as the girlfriend is incredibly good. They match up incredibly well. Tom Cruise is pretty dazzling, actually. You know, he gives another, I think, you know, an incredibly charismatic star turn. You know, he's incredibly watchable. And I think some people are, you know, like John Hamm in a film is the best that I've seen him since Mad Men. Yeah? He's always in these movies and he's never quite right. There's always something that, for me, doesn't work with him.
I know what you mean.
And here, he's great. You know? The production is extraordinary. You know, the direction, in formal terms, is superb. You know, the fight scenes are exciting, I think.
Yeah.
You know, so all of those things work. What remains kind of fundamentally, to me, wrong with it is it's emotionally manipulative in really stupid ways, like this thing that you were referring to, you know, earlier, this repetition of the lines, right? I think it's banal. And of course, the whole ideological project of the whole thing, which I think is why it's so fantastically popular, you know, is that it kind of reaffirms American exceptionalism, you know. So there's a line in which one of the characters says, well, we no longer have a technological advantage. So what advantage do they have? Well, it's one of character. Of being American, right? So, you know.
Although it's tempered insofar as they don't ever point out who the enemy is. They're bombing this uranium enrichment sort of base thing, which is, you know, just like it's the MacGuffin that they have to get to and drop the bombs on. I don't think at any point they say, oh, it's the Russians or the Iraqis or whoever the hell. It's just a uranium thing we need to get rid of. So they're kind of... Are they slightly hedging their bets as to, like... Because beforehand they would have no problem saying it's the Russians. We're in the Cold War, you know. We've got to fight the evil enemies.
Yes, I think it's important, you know, in terms of marketing, to not name the enemy. Something that, you know, I just want to point out before I forget, well, two main things, actually, that both bother me, really. So one, which is part of the success of the film, is the treatment of this whole macho one-upmanship, right? As a kind of standard collegial fun. Yeah, it's what every man does. Yeah, and I found that, like, you know, obnoxious and, you know, maybe just because I'm a gay man, but I find it, like, yeah, obnoxious and also alienating, right? Like, if that's the way that kind of men behave with men, kind of leave them to it. But, you know, kind of, I don't see it as attractive as the film does, right? Yeah.
Are you thinking largely of the hangman character? Who's the one who's...
I think of the hangman character, the way that they're introduced. Yeah, it all feels like a fight, a competition, aggression.
Sure.
I mean, those are just things that on a personal level really do not appeal to me, right? The film... 36 years later is interesting because there's women, yeah, which I don't remember from the first version. I don't remember women pilots. I think they were all men. Meg Ryan was Goose's wife, and Kelly McGillis was Actually, I mean, she was a training officer, I think, actually, Kelly McGillis was.
But here we have one girl.
Who was a pilot, yeah.
Yes, exactly. He's one of the best.
Yes. And you also see kind of more black people and Latinos and so on than I remember from the first. The other thing, well, several things actually. So let me just list them before I forget. Mm-hmm. So one thing that caught my eye is, of course, the famous volleyball scene, right? Mm-hmm. You know, which is like in the first film is very homoerotic and so on. In this one, it was very interesting because, of course, Tom Cruise looks fantastic, but he's old. Mm. You know, he's 60, right? So, I don't know if you noticed, but most of the shots were shot against the sun, right? So that a lot of their bodies are in shadows or in silhouettes or...
Right.
Yeah, or he's filmed in the back. I think there's a couple of shots where you see his chest, right? And the price of really not seeing Tom Cruise's body is that you also don't get to see the other people's, except brief flashes, right? So you have all these young, gorgeous actors, right, whose job really is to get their tits out in this scene, right, and who are not quite allowed to do it because you want to preserve the star's vanity.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I did feel that you weren't seeing them in the way that, you know, it wasn't having that homoerotic effect.
No.
But I felt it was more about the speed of the editing of it, that it never lingered on a character's body. Or they weren't glistening with sweat.
Yes, and they weren't in slow motion.
Yeah.
But of course, the reason why is to preserve the vanity of the star. Yeah, because if you do that with Tom Cruise's 60-year-old body, yes.
And of course, he leaves the game early and goes and puts on a t-shirt.
And exactly, right? So that really caught my eye because it's a very clever way of making the star function within that, but actually at the price of audience pleasure in those bodies.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. The other thing that I kind of just want to draw attention to is the presence of Val Kilmer, right? Which to me relates to Tom Cruise because obviously Val Kilmer in that role in the 86 film, you know, he was really poised for stardom. And in fact, he starred in quite a few films.
Yeah, he was Batman.
Yeah, and I thought he as Jim Morrison in the Doors, the Oliver Stone Doors film, you know, I mean, I swooned. I thought he was the sexiest thing ever, really, in that film. So basically, kind of the film, in a way, is also asking you to compare, Cruise and Kilmer. And of course, I think Kilmer has had personal health problems, right?
That limit his vocal ability.
You know, and he's very good and so on. And I really appreciated seeing him. But when you have those two together, you can't help but compare them. Yeah. And of course, that underlines, kind of Cruise's stardom in a way. Yeah.
Well, stardom and kind of physical condition. I mean, it's a comparison of the two people's physical condition. Yeah. Val Kilmer is very limited, not just in that he can barely speak and a kind of an excuse is given to him to not speak. We're essentially told, not in this many words, he's had throat cancer, which I think may have been Val Kilmer's actual medical condition, but I'm not sure. And he does whisper a few lines later in that scene. But it's also that he barely moves. You know, facially, he can't really.
Yes.
And he's not really asked to. And like all the acting in that scene, quote unquote acting, is given to Tom Cruise to do, and he has most of the lines and so on. Yes. But Val Kilmer is important there, and they actually have a nice, you know, the button on that scene where he asks who was the best pilot, and they leave it on a funny note. It's really nice actually. But yeah, it is about it is a thing that underlines, like, Tom Cruise is famous for doing his own stunts, and, you know, being in the helicopter in Mission Impossible, and I'm sure he's in the plane here flying it himself and all that stuff, breaking his leg in the one Mission Impossible film a couple of years ago. He's famous for keeping on doing that, and it does kind of, I don't think it's right to say that it's unfair. It's just the way it is that Val Kilmer has, you know, physically gone in a different direction.
Yes.
But it highlights it.
Yes.
Right.
And, you know, kind of in a way, I was very happy to see the Val Kilmer character. But my God, you know, Cruise is terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, you know, it makes me think that he and Julia Roberts, you know, to me, are the stars of that era, of like, the last 20, 30 years, because, they literally light up a film. Like their smile literally lights up a film, kind of, they smile and like the film seems to, just get better or something, like, it adds a spark or something, which is kind of, quite extraordinary. So, I'm not convinced of him by him, as a great actor. But he's definitely the greatest star of the last 40 years, and of particular significance in the sense that he is the most zeitgeisty star, right? So a lot of debates around American culture have been argued around his films. Mm-hmm. Like, from the 80s, Risky Business and Born on the 4th of July and, and this one. And, kind of, it's I mean, the films are successes, because... they're very well produced, but also, because his persona kind of, brings particular types of debates or kind of issues into kind of public fora, and I think he's done it again with this one, right? Like, I mean, who would have expected the sequel to a film that's like 30 odd years old, would become the biggest hit.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Well, it's his biggest hit. We were just looking. I just saw a website that had the stats on. It's made some $290 million domestically, which is his biggest domestic hit ever. And as you said, I think that's not adjusted for inflation. But his second, unadjusted, his second was War of the Worlds in 2005, which was 240-ish.
But also, what I was thinking, if for the sake of argument, we can say that this film is not a franchise, I mean, the original Top Gun was so long ago, it's not like a Marvel film or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
It's hard to think of it.
Yeah. So, it's just for the sake of argument, we think that it's not a franchise. It's like the biggest hit of the last 10 years that's not a franchise. That's not a Jurassic Park or a Marvel film or... I mean, I can't think of another film, that's kind of been this kind of a success without being tied to
I don't know.
I would be
I'll
so it's not Star Wars, it's not Jurassic Park, it's not Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, try to think of like some other film that's kind of grossed those figures.
Let me have a... I'm just looking at like highest grossing films in the last 10 years.
10 years,
because we've got
of the 2010s put.
Yeah, so that's what I'm looking at. 2010s in film, so this is not included in the last couple of years, but...
And exclude Pixar.
Yeah, it's all Endgame, it's all Avengers, Star Wars, Jurassic Park, Lion King, which, Disney remake, Frozen was original, but, again, big Disney thing, Harry Potter's in there, Fast and Furious films are in there, the Minions films are in there, James Bond's in there. The Dark Knight Rises, which is still franchisee. Transformers, Joker, which is on the edge of a franchise. It's still Batman. Pirates of the Caribbean. Seriously, Alice in Wonderland, Disney.
Yeah, see?
Hobbit. I'm getting into the 40s here. Jumanji, which is a sequel to an old film that's maybe Top Gun-ish. That might be the closest that you get. But the one that is most clearly not related to a franchise or that kind of thing, Bohemian Rhapsody, which is 46th in this list of the 2010s and made $900 million worldwide. That's 46th in the list. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there you go.
So anyway, there's just something interesting about that, right? And I think it does have to do with Tom Cruise. Yeah.
He pulls the film in a way that most other people can't. Yeah. I'm glad that the film, I think I sort of said, kind of got tempered, and one of the things that got tempered as well is the pro-Americanness. Like, I think you're right about still, it's ultimately about the Americans are the people who can pull off this mission and so on. But early on, when the Top Gun Academy is being introduced, and they have the giant fucking American flag just in this hangar for no reason. It's just there to show off to the camera. You're thinking, oh, Jesus Christ. And Tom Cruise is framed in front of it just so. You're thinking, Jesus. That does get tempered down. So even though the film is still coated with American flags here and there, and the kind of kind of trappings of the military, like you have the military funeral for Iceman when he dies, and it has all of that solemnity that's conveyed with
the wings,
21 gun salutes and all that.
My God.
It is mostly kind of tempered, which is something I appreciate. I think maybe that partially goes to that marketing you talk about with, we're not going to talk about who the enemy is here, and we're going to slightly dampen the rah-rahness.
Yes, which might just have to do with the recognition that, because at one point these films would have been made primarily for an American audience, and then they would sell whatever they could around the world. Whereas now there's very much a recognition that it's a global market, that it has to appeal, to Europeans and to the Chinese or whatever, right? So it might not be that they're tempering it because they want to temper this rawness. It might just be, we've got to look after the customer.
Make sure we don't alienate the customer.
I also want to point out that, how sometimes, I talk about a film and I say, there wasn't an interesting image in it. This is the opposite. I mean, the film was full of, images that kind of caught my eye. Sometimes, really minimal ones. Just the way that, Tom Cruise's face was framed, inside the light of the airplane at night, right? And it just looked graphically, superb,
Yeah.
The scene that you're describing, with the American flag in the background, and then you cut into a close-up, and in fact you just see the red bars, right?
Yeah.
And that creates such an interesting kind of image, right? So the film is full of images like that, actually.
Yeah.
So I think it's a real filmmaker's film.
Yeah. The fight scenes look unbelievable. They're stunning. And the training scenes or where they're actually engaging in the mission, and then leads to dogfights and so on. They're incredible, and there are all sorts of bits of design within the scene that, like for instance, they get out of this valley where the mission takes place, and in trying to escape, then they get spotted, which they knew that was going to happen, and a dogfight ensues as they try to escape. And so you've got these planes chasing them down, and they're releasing chaff to defend themselves from the missiles that are being launched at them. And then, of course, Miles Teller runs out of chaff, and so what's going to happen? And Tom Cruise sacrifices himself. It's part of this father-son story. I'm trying to be the father that he never had, and he doesn't appreciate me, and so on. But it's wonderful because it makes it into the fight scene in such a great way that he flies in between them, releases his chaff, and then gets shot down himself, but he saved Miles Teller. It's great, and it works perfectly. You understand immediately what's happening. I mean, there's no point in it, despite the fact that all these planes all look the same. Even especially in the training scenes where they're trying to shoot down Tom Cruise, and he's in the same plane as the rest of them. You're never confused about anything at all.
That's one of the amazing things in the film, because actually it's very exciting. But the geography of the action is always absolutely clear. You absolutely know where everything is going, right? And also, you talked about the quickness of the editing in the volleyball scene, right? But that's almost never repeated in the rest of the film. You feel that kind of things are cut to a point. Yeah.
Well, they have a rhythm.
Yeah.
And things are allowed to feel weighty. There's a great shot great scene, great sequence in Taken 3, I think it is, which is very well known. It kind of does the rounds online because it's a sequence of Liam Neeson jumping a fence, I think, but it's done with 15 cuts in about a second and a half. All of him from different angles getting over this fence. It's so stupid. It's so overdone. It's completely the opposite. Things are allowed to have weight, time on screen. You understand. It's that partially has that thing of every shot has a piece of information to convey to you, which is important. Whenever you see a shot of a plane, there's a plane in the background that you understand they're in relationship, or shot from in the cockpit, or shot even that's of the pilot's face, which you would think is showing you nothing really other than maybe their emotion. But no, there's a plane in the background, or it's where they're looking. They're always showing you something, and everything's in relation to something else geographically. The film's produced, amongst its main producers, is Christopher McQuarrie, who is the guy who is now in charge of Mission Impossible and has been for several years, director of those. So I think that's probably had an influence. But that's not to take it away from the director of this. Was his name Kosminski?
His name is Joseph Kosinski.
Yeah, it's not taken away from him because because the action scenes in Tron Legacy were actually probably the best bits of that film.
I also really liked Oblivion.
I haven't seen that.
And I thought that actually was a weightier film.
Yeah.
So, yes.
I think it's around the time... Wasn't Will Smith also doing After Earth, which was where he got, like, super serious about sci-fi?
Yes. But I didn't see After Earth.
No.
So this is 2013.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an incredible film because, again, so much of it just focuses on Tom Cruise, really.
The other thing I want to mention, and it may seem small, but I thought it's quite funny, is, you come to this film with no knowledge of Top Gun, like I do, basically. And you go, fine, it is what it is, and I'll enjoy this. But it turns out that your knowledge of Star Wars really comes in handy, because the whole mission is a Star Wars, it's a Death Star trench run, which itself, like I say, to be fair, was essentially robbed from the Dam Busters. So, everything has its precedent. But this even has a bit where, so the idea is that you fly through this trench below the radar, and then you get into the big valley where the target is in the ground. And the first one of you hits the target, and the second one, who's flying behind you, now shoots into the open hole created by the target and blows the whole thing up. And it really is that thing of, you've got to fly to the end of this trench, dodging all the fire, and then you shoot into the waste ejector, whatever thing it was, and then you blow the Death Star. And you're thinking, okay, well, I've seen it before and whatever, it's fine, I like it. But this even has a moment where, because you've got Tom Cruise flying the first leg of the mission, and Miles Teller flying the second behind him. He's going to do the killer shot. And he's flying very slowly, he can't keep up, and there's something in him he's not doing it, he can't put the throttle down. Go. Exactly, right? And he basically has like an Obi-Wan Kenobi moment. He's like Obi-Wan Kenobi speaks to him, where Tom Cruise, I don't think he can hear him on the comms, maybe he can, but it's like Tom Cruise is basically saying, do it, let go and all this. And it's like literally, right? It has that. And then when he gets into that valley and the target's been opened for him, the guy on his wing who is supposed to laser target the thing, his laser goes haywire. So he has to do it by eye, which is, and that's again from Star Wars, he puts the targeting machine away and just does it by the Force.
Except Rooster doesn't have the Force.
No, well, he has all American, and he has his dad, Tom Cruise, willing him on.
Yes.
So it's and the thing is, then the film goes on to have this dogfight, which is, not from Star Wars. I'm not saying it's like just pinching everything from Star Wars, but it was very funny to see those things essentially kind of adapted here. Like they really do show up.
Anyway, I was I liked it a lot more than I thought I did, in spite of my irritations and reservations. I do think it's an amazing piece of filmmaking, except you then think, well, formally it's an exceptional piece of filmmaking, but to what end? Yeah.
Well, it's in service of
Make America Great Again. That's its project, really.
Yeah.
And in that way, it's very dodgy.
Well, in that sense, I mean, they have this thing. It is a weird thing. They have this thing about the number of American pilots who have multiple kills in the air, who shot down another plane, and it's like 3 planes. It's not like they have like the Red Baron, but it's like you get to the end of the film, and the one guy, that cocky guy who ends up saving the day for them all at the end, has his second kill in the air, and they're like, that's pretty good. And then they go, Tom Cruise has got 5 now.
Yes.
And that makes him an ace. And you're like, are we still celebrating this? It's weird. Like, it's weird to just go, by the way, you've murdered 5 people.
Yeah. It's Lewis, it's Glenn Powell.
Glenn Powell, he's the
very sexy Glenn Powell.
Yeah.
So he's the one.
I wanted to finally say that you are really, really having a different experience to what you thought you'd have.
Yes.
I think that's really, really true, because you're saying, all these people are saying it's a really good film online, all your friends, and you're going, how can it possibly be?
Yes.
But you found out that you're essentially agreeing with them, right?
Yes. I mean, I think, I think I have more reservations than they do.
Mm-hmm.
I do. It did work on me emotionally, but I did feel manipulated into it. I have more reservations. So when I was watching it, I was mostly with it. There were moments where, I groaned. Yeah, there are moments that took me out of the film, and you're conscious of the mechanics of manipulation, and also, the the stupid tropes of the genre, the repetition of dialogue and
we've been through,
the macho-ness and all of that stuff. So, I mean, I'm not an unreserved admirer, though I was surprised at how much better it was than I thought it would be.
I'm interested that you were moved at all, because I wasn't moved. Although I suppose I could see how it was trying to, particularly at the end when they're all hugging.
Yes.
But I never felt moved. I never felt close to it. I was surprised, actually, at how much I bought into the father-son history story.
Yes.
And Tom Cruise, I think, so you say it's hard to make a case for him as a great actor. Maybe that's the case, and he's more of a star than an actor. But
he's a great star.
He's extraordinarily empathetic in this.
He is.
And when he's kind of struggling to connect with the kids, and he feels guilty for what happened to his dad and his part in it and all that, it's writ on his face, and he's very, very good.
I mean, the distinction that I'm trying to make here between a star and an actor is that, in a way, Tom Cruise is great because you actually understand and feel everything he's trying to communicate. Mm-hmm. The reason why he's not a great actor is that it's never subtle or it's never contradictory, right? Like, it's never a complex thing. Yeah. But he's communicating everything clearly, and he's making you feel empathy for his character, right? Like, I am always charmed by him. Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of, the way that he smiles and the way that he looks, and, kind of, he is very charming, right? So the combination of charm and of being able to really convey anything, kind of, that is an extraordinary thing. Now, that you never feel the complexities or the contradictions, or that it's there's always a certainty about who he is and how he is, even when he's being vulnerable. That I think is what what the problem is, because great actors do that. I remember him first being spoken of in Taps, and then Coppola's The Outsiders, where he played a supporting role. Risky Business was his first breakout big hit.
Huge, yeah.
Yeah, and that was 1983.
Yeah.
So actually, that is what, 40 years?
83, yeah, getting on for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
39.
He will be beginning his 5th decade as a star next year. It's incredible.
Yeah.
I don't think, when you think of the really great Hollywood stars, when you think of like a Clark Gable, who became a star in the early 30s, right? But he died in the early 60s, so that's 30 years, right? I mean, Gary Cooper, the same thing, didn't make it past 60. Other people like James Stewart, who became a star later, like let's say, 36, 37, 38, something like that. Well, by 1968, he was still a star, but he wasn't a box office star, right? So this idea of somebody, or even somebody like Bette Davis or whatever, or even Katharine Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn might be the exception because she was a star in 32, and she could still get a film made in the early 70s, but could she? I mean, she was doing television, she was doing Tennessee Williams for television in the mid-70s, and, that thing with Laurence Olivier and George Cukor in the mid-70s, so presumably she couldn't get a theatrical film made, by the mid-70s. So I think, the only thing I'm trying to say is that it's an exceptionally long career as a box office star. Yeah, he's still getting top dollar. He still has the power to greenlight films. And 40 years after he became a star, this is one of the big hits of the year. It's really quite extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well done, Tom Cruise. We must all become Scientologists.
All right. So let's wrap this up. Do you have any last words?
Yes. Hail Xenu.
Well, on that note, thank you very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Is it Xenu that you should be hailing? I've got to just check. Is Xenu not the enemy? I think I've basically said Hail Satan. So apologies to all the Scientologists listening.